Every product has a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and eventually an end. But when we're talking about AI products, that story gets, well, a lot more complex. It's more dynamic, and frankly, it can be downright dangerous if you don't know how to read the signs. So today, let's break down the one story that every single product leader absolutely has to master.
And I'm not kidding, the stakes could not be higher. This isn't just some abstract business framework we're talking about. Understanding a product's lifecycle is literally the key to its survival. If you get this right, you can dodge like 90% of the pitfalls that sink even the most brilliant ideas out there.
Okay, so how do we actually navigate all this complexity? Well, the answer is a really powerful framework. It basically maps out a product's entire journey, giving us a clear roadmap to follow.
So what is the product lifecycle? Really, it's just a guide for managing a product through all its different stages. It tells you exactly what to focus on, when you should be investing your resources, and maybe most importantly, when it's time to let go. The easiest way to wrap your head around this is to think of it like a human life. Seriously, a product is born, it grows up, it hits this stable peak in its career, and then, eventually, it retires. And just like with a person, each one of those phases requires a completely different approach.
So let's actually break down that life story into its 4 main chapters. Getting these down is the foundation for, well, everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, here they are, the 4 classic stages. You've got introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. It sounds simple, right? And it is predictable, but it's also incredibly powerful if you actually know how to use it.
All right, first up is the introduction stage. Think of this as the product's birth. Your only goal here is survival. That's it. You're not trying to conquer the world just yet. You're just trying to prove that your idea even has a pulse and find those first few early users who desperately need what you've built. Then, if you're lucky, comes the growth spurt. If the introduction stage was about finding a tiny spark, the growth stage is all about fanning it into a blazing fire. Your focus shifts completely. Now it's all about scaling up, getting your product into as many hands as possible, and, crucially, making sure those users actually stick around. After that, we hit maturity. This is kind of like the product's stable, midlife career. Growth starts to slow down, and you know what? That's totally okay. Because now the name of the game is efficiency. The focus is on keeping the customers you already have, optimizing your costs, and really maximizing your profitability.
And finally, every product's life eventually comes to an end. This is the decline stage, or as we're calling it, retirement. Look, the goal here isn't to fight gravity. It's to manage the end gracefully. That might mean migrating users to a newer product, or just planning a smooth, thoughtful sunset.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. For AI products, that simple, neat 4-stage story we just walked through, it gets a lot more complicated.
So why is that? It's because an AI model isn't just a static piece of code you write once and forget about. It's more like a living, breathing system. It has to be constantly fed new data, you have to monitor it for performance issues, and it needs to be retrained all the time just to stay relevant. Its life isn't a straight line, it's a continuous, never-ending loop. And this is where the game truly changes. Think about it. In the early MVP stage, maybe you're just worried about having bad data. But once you hit scale, your biggest enemy becomes something called model drift, which is basically the silent killer of AI products. Your investment strategy, who you hire, the metrics you track, your entire playbook has to completely transform at each stage. One size fits none. So in a way, managing an AI product is kind of like being a doctor for a living thing. You have to be constantly monitoring its health and be ready to treat all the unique illnesses that can pop up and affect it.
Okay, so the first big illness is something called model drift. All this means is that your AI starts to get out of touch with the real world. Its predictions just get worse and worse over time, simply because, well, the world changes. So what's the cure? You have to build automated systems that act like a non-stop education program for your AI, constantly retraining it on fresh data to keep it sharp.
And right alongside that, you've got data decay. This is when the data you originally trained your model on becomes stale, old, and just not representative of today's world. To fight this, you can use some pretty cool techniques, like generating synthetic data or using active learning to keep your data sets fresh, relevant, and powerful.
And this next one, this might be the most critical challenge of all: trust erosion. Look, if your users can't rely on what your AI is telling them, your product is dead in the water. It's that simple. So what do? You build in features like confidence scores to show users how sure the AI is about its answer. And you create human-in-the-loop systems for those moments when a real person just needs to step in and make the final call.
Okay, so we know the challenges, we know what we should be doing, but that's only half the battle, right? Now let's flip it and talk about what not to do. Let's talk about the fatal mistakes that can bring a product's life to a really tragic end.
The number one killer, by far, is stage confusion. This is when you apply a growth stage strategy to a mature product, or the other way around. I mean, it's like sending a retiree to an all-night rave. It doesn't fit, and it's not going to work.
Now, for AI products specifically, ignoring model drift is a flat-out death sentence. You could have the best, most accurate model in the world on day one, but if you forget that it's this living thing it's constantly learning and decaying, it will fail. You have to treat it like a garden that needs constant, careful tending.
Here's another classic mistake we see all the time: over-investing in the maturity stage. Your product is stable, right? The focus should be on efficiency, on retention. But instead, what do teams do? They pour millions into chasing shiny new features, trying to recapture that old thrill of the growth stage. And honestly, it's usually just a massive waste of resources.
And last but not least, failing to plan for the end. I know it feels a little negative to talk about, but not having a sunset plan just creates chaos. It's expensive, it frustrates the loyal users you have left, and it can really damage your brand's reputation. A good ending is every bit as important as a good beginning. So, to wrap all of this up, let's bring it back to you. After everything we've just gone through, I want to leave you with one simple question, and be honest with yourself. What stage is your product in right now? And more importantly, are you absolutely sure you're using the right strategy for it?